Hello, and welcome to our leadership webinar series, co-hosted by Sanford Inspired and NCUST. My name is Amanda Rothingas, the Program Manager for Sanford Inspire, and we are honored to be co-presenting this series to support school leaders or aspiring school leaders in such challenging times. The opinions and content in this presentation are that of the featured speaker and panelists and may not necessarily be a direct representation of Sanford Inspire or NCUST. For best live viewing today, we recommend you close all other browsers while viewing this presentation. If you do have questions during the presentation, please type them in the question box. We will send out a copy of the recording after the webinar so you can watch it at any time or share with your colleagues. As we begin this presentation, we would like to find out a bit more about you. In a moment, a poll will be displayed to find out about your current role. After you complete the poll, please type in the question box what education institution you work in and where you work. For example, Hoover Elementary School, Kansas. Go ahead and respond to the poll right on your screen now. And as soon as you've had a chance to respond to the screen, please go ahead and type in the question box what institution you work for and where you're located. Wow, we have a wide range of audience today, from Venezuela to Florida, elementary schools to middle schools to childcare. We have California, we have Connecticut, we have Massachusetts, North Carolina, New York City, Chicago, Detroit, Phoenix, Arizona, Houston, Texas, Las Vegas, San Diego, University Professor, Davis, California, San Jose, Long Beach, New York, Rochester Public Schools, Madison, Wisconsin. Wow, such a great representation today. Looks like most of you had a chance to vote. Let's go ahead and close the poll and see what your positions are. All right, 29% of you are teachers today, 39% are school support personnel, 14% school level administrator, 7% district level administrator, and 18% other. Thank you so much for participating in our poll today to give us a sense of our audience. It's my pleasure today to welcome Dr. Joe Donson, the Executive Director of the National Center for Urban School Transformation, NCUST. NCUST identifies, awards, and studies schools that achieve outstanding learning results for all students. They are a perfect partner for the webinar series because of the social emotional needs of all students. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Ms. Rothingas. It is our honor to work with Sanford Inspire on this important webinar series. Both of our organizations recognize that schools throughout the nation faced huge challenges as they consider the health and safety needs associated with reopening school in the months ahead. As well, so many educators are rightfully concerned about the learning losses many students endured while school buildings were closed for 10 to 12 or more weeks. Nonetheless, we also recognize that over the past few months, many students and many staff members have endured worry, sorrow, fear, loneliness, and frustration. Students of all ages have seen, heard, and experienced so much related to COVID-19, police brutality, racial violence, and social unrest in this nation. So by the end of this series, we hope that participating schools will have stronger, more complete plans for how they will ensure a socially, emotionally healthy reopening in a way that advances true equity in learning outcomes. In this first session, we will emphasize why planning for reopening is so important. The second session link will be emailed to all registered participants on July 1st, and will emphasize the importance of including in reopening plans deliberate efforts to listen to students as well as other stakeholders. A third session link will be emailed to all registered participants on July 8th and will emphasize the critical importance of designing action plans that respond to the needs of all students and all demographic groups of students. The fourth session link will be emailed to all registered participants on July 15th and will help everyone think about how their reopening plans should include provisions for building the capacity of everyone to respond to various social emotional needs well. Then, in the final session on July 30th, we will share a few highlights from some of the plans you develop. We will provide all of you in the audience an opportunity to share a small aspect of your reopening plan that highlights how you will better address your students' social emotional needs. So to begin this session, we have a wonderful guest speaker joining us to discuss why it's so important for leaders to plan now to address equity and students' social emotional needs as schools prepare to reopen. Dr. Jennica Paz is a nationally certified school psychologist and licensed clinical psychologist. She is passionate about ensuring high-quality service delivery to youth with histories of adverse life circumstances. Her research interests, publications, and presentations at local and national conferences are related to positive youth development, strength-based assessment, trauma resiliency among foster youth, school-based mental health, school violence, safety, psychometrics, and neurodevelopmental neuropsychological assessments. She is an outstanding professor who is helping prepare a diverse cohort of school psychologists. Dr. Paz, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for that very warm introduction. I very much appreciate your kind words, and it is a true honor to be joining you all in these efforts today. So as we begin and we start to orient ourselves into envisioning what the school flow will look like as students and staff begin to re-enter campus, please take a brief moment to visualize one thing from your school that brings you peace. This should be something that when you think about, fills you with happiness. And I'll give you a brief moment to just sort of envision. So for me, it is seeing the spark of joy on the faces of my students when they first enter the classroom and are talking about something interesting or inspiring that happened during their day. I'm guessing that for most of you, you probably did not envision a scene which included students anxiously completing schoolwork or perhaps avoiding tasks due to not understanding the content. As we prepare for the start of the new academic year, it is important to recognize that we will all be entering a sort of post-vention climate as we reintegrate back into the schools. For some, there may be an eagerness to get back to business as usual. However, this standard of practice must be critically examined, as the usual way of operating will likely not serve in the best interest with respect to the social and emotional wellness among our students and our staff as well. While we are amidst both a global and racial pandemic, the social justice and a social justice reckoning really, in reality, we've been surviving an entire decade laden with surges of moral and sociopolitical upheaval, mass publicized school shootings, and unapologetic activism calling to mobilize minoritized voices. It is our ethical obligation to ensure social justice and equity now more than ever. It is our duty to enhance the potentials of our youth to be able to thrive in today's world. And these are more imperative now than ever before. School systems, which we all are fortunate to be a part of, serve as a critical protective factor for youth to experience a sense of safety within which to learn and be provided opportunities for meaningful social emotional development to enhance their capacity as future productive global citizens. School ecosystems have an ethical and legal duty to promote the educational success and ensure well-being among its students. So in order to adequately capture the social emotional needs of their students, local education agencies need reliable tools and methods for prevention and intervention systems to promote complete mental health of all students. I'm going to pause just a moment because I'm hearing some feedback. Is it possible to make sure that all attendees are muted and panelists? I apologize.
On my own setting.
I believe.
Yes, please make sure all panelists are muted.
To teach students about butterfly life cycle each year. This one's well simply engaged in my classroom culture and writing activities. However, it's not to say standard. Instead of teacher and able to bring.
Sorry about the technical issues. Panelists, if you can just check that you're muted.
However, if I was prescribed a SBC,
or is it possible to mute for them on their behalf?
No longer that we're not direct.
Amy, is it possible to mute everyone just to make sure? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I apologize for that. So given the current context, the time for preventative measures is actually kind of now in our wake, and we must acknowledge the variety of prolonged traumatic exposure to upsetting events that our students have experienced over the last several months. Our students very well may be entering school displaying symptoms of acute distress or even post-traumatic stress symptoms stemming from complex trauma exposure. Thus, as we're planning for the reopening of our schools, we must lean into our trauma-informed care practices and ensure that social emotional learning and well-being are just as attended to as the need to catch up on the backlog of missed education. Decades of research have indicated that social emotional competencies are required building blocks in order for academic achievement to occur. For those of you who are familiar with supporting students in communities exposed to trauma, you may have heard of the metaphor of the invisible backpack, which is used to describe the unseen emotional loads that our students exposed to trauma carry with them into the classroom every single day. As we reintegrate back into the schools, we must be mindful of the fact that the invisible backpacks are likely going to be extra heavy for many students, and they will require added support to gently unpack their items so that they can free up the cognitive and emotional space to engage meaningfully in their academic work. With respect to policy and mandates, I've been in communication with several school psychologists nationwide, and I have been hearing stories of their feelings of mounting pressure to catch up on overdue timelines, to complete special education evaluations, all of this with very little regard to the social emotional well-being of their students. The California Association of School Psychologists released a position statement recently in which I'd like to incorporate a quote from, as I feel it is relevant for other related service personnel who are also attempting to prepare for the upcoming school year. School psychologists are more than just special education assessors and should be relied upon to help counsel staff, students, and families to help them manage continued psychological and emotional turmoil stemming from pre-crisis issues or caused by the crisis, and help students reintegrate into school. While attention to crisis intervention might be needed right away, the importance of and need for developing resiliency as well as crisis prevention may be more embraced. So other school-wide prevention programs may be considered, such as positive behavioral interventions and supports, otherwise known as PBIS, or social emotional learning, SEL. So from a public health approach to school-based mental health, the high incidence of children with unmet mental health needs, coupled with the limited resources available to provide assistance, has been long recognized and remains an unresolved issue. Universal screening for social emotional well-being is a key step in service delivery reform to move SEL, or social emotional learning, and psychological services from the end of the to-do list to the very top in order to focus on positive mental health promotion. School psychologists, site administrators, teachers, and district personnel are critical players to promote this service delivery change. Using the CASEL, which stands for Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, definition for SEL. SEL is described broadly as the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. A systemic approach to SEL intentionally cultivates a caring, participatory, and equitable learning environment and evidence-based practices that actively involve all students in their social, emotional, and academic growth. This approach infuses social and emotional learning into every part of students' daily lives, from across their classrooms, during all times of the school day, and when they are in their homes and communities. When implemented, we know that SEL programming is associated not only with increased academic performance compared to students who did not receive any SEL programming, but meaningful gains are also associated with respect to improved classroom behavior, increased ability to manage stress and depression, and have better attitudes about themselves in school. These are all areas that we're anticipating are going to be highly impacted post-COVID and post our racial pandemics. Results from SEL programs have also been shown to have long-lasting positive impact up to 18 years later with respect to academics, conduct problems, and emotional distress, drug use, among a variety of other quality of life outcomes. We also know there's a solid body of evidence supporting the benefits of prevention and early intervention programs following universal screening to determine who is in need of services that boost social emotional competency. However, traditional school-based screening practices focus exclusively on risk factors or symptoms of mental distress, and these are designed so that only 15 to 20% of students or those who are experiencing the most significant symptoms of distress will be identified, rather than obtaining data on the social emotional health and positive functioning for 100% of students. Now, I wish I could share data on the percentage of students who are experiencing significant emotional distress as a direct result of the current pandemic. However, those data do not yet exist. I can share anecdotally from recent discussions I've had with middle and high school students that overwhelmingly they're expressing themes about desperately missing the social aspects of their school and their connections with the teachers and staff. So what I think will be most meaningful is for school administrators to begin to prepare and strategize for screening their own school community and to have data to inform well-fitting social emotional learning curricula and begin designing school-wide positive psychological practices that serve to enhance the well-being and feelings of safety for all students. My recommendation would be to utilize a comprehensive, complete, or dual factor mental health screener in addition to school climate and safety measures, at least biannually, to monitor student needs. Just as with other post-vention crisis responses, it'll be important to triage the level of supports offered to students based on their individual experiences related to the various crisis events that have occurred. So implementing approaches such as multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS, may support a school's ability to differentiate implementation of social emotional supports that ensure SEL programming is available universally for all students. Those youth who have had more close and direct exposure will require more intensive Tier 3 levels of support, while students who may have only had brief or distal exposure may require only the universal level of SEL supports. Embedding evidence-based SEL practices that promote cultural responsiveness and equity in promoting school mental health are currently in high demand, and they're long overdue, quite frankly. Programs such as positive discipline, restorative justice, and collaborative problem solving provide excellent trauma-informed foundations that are also sensitive to culture and race, and when rolled out school-wide, can provide a number of benefits in terms of improving school climate, feelings of safety, and belonging. Several other curricula are also available for teachers to adapt and swap. They can actually swap in some of these SEL curricula with traditional measures that are aligned with Common Core standards, but they emphasize the important social emotional building blocks that will provide increased benefit for our youth. So here on the next slide, you will actually see some links to websites that provide ample guidance on evidence-based approaches to assessing social emotional health. One exemplar that I would like to highlight is the Social Emotional Health Screener, or the SEHS, developed by the International Center for Positive School-Based Youth Development from the University of California, Santa Barbara. This was developed while I was a graduate student there. I currently am the San Diego-based liaison for this tool. So in addition to obtaining individual and school-wide data on student social emotional well-being from this measure, the SEHS, you will also be able to locate and access relevant positive psychological social emotional learning curricula that can readily be implemented by teachers and staff on your campus. So for example, if your school-wide data yields feedback for a group of, say, 5th grade students who are scoring low in the emotional regulation domain, related classroom interventions might include cultivating self-confidence and positive self-regard by implementing curricula such as growth mindset and/or different optimism kinds of activities. And so to learn more about that, please visit our Project Co-Vitality website. And then lastly, if you're in the position where you kind of have to use what you have and you're wondering how you can maybe better utilize school-wide mandated screeners, it might be of interest for you to know that the SEHS can be adopted as a, if you're here in California at least, can be adopted as a module on the California Healthy Kids Survey in lieu of the Module G, which is the resiliency module. And opting for this module instead will provide a much more comprehensive picture of youth positive psychological strengths, assets, mindsets, and these all will help you indicate social emotional well-being and competency. And lastly on here, the CASEL website and link provided will take you to a page in which you may review separate reports by grade level, focusing on evidence-based SEL programming, as well as a whole report dedicated just to assessment and progress monitoring tools that you can skim through and chat about as a team and select and adopt based on your own unique school needs. And full implementation guides are also available on these websites. Now I'm going to pause here because I know I just shared a whole lot of information, but I'm hoping some of this got some of your creative juices flowing. So I'm going to turn it back over to Amanda because I believe we have a question that we'd like to pose to you all.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Paz, for sharing those words of wisdom. So there was one question, if that screener is applicable to preschool age children.
That is a great question. It actually, it's student self-report, so that begins starting in grades 3. So we have measures available from grades 3 through higher education, actually. But there are other measures that can be provided to teachers and parents that are related screeners. So we could also help troubleshoot some of that.
Great, thank you so much. Now we'd like to hear from the audience. I know that was a lot of information you just heard, but hopefully the main takeaway was that you know that mental health is more important now than ever. So what is one way that you can support mental health promotion when your campus reopens? So please type your responses in the question box and I will share out some of the responses. We have school-wide mindfulness, practicing mindfulness, student check-ins, listen to the youth, universal screenings, growth mindset, talking to the teachers about their needs, PBIS, daily check-ins, morning meetups, restorative check-ins, making students feel safe, providing a safe space, comprehensive counseling program, listening to student and family needs, showing them love, community circles, yoga and visualizations, importance of mental health for students, morning meetings, check-ins, listening, exclamation point, embedding teachable moments, stopping the lesson, peer check-ins, safe space for students, really listening. Ms. Paz, do you have any reflection on some of the responses that you heard?
I sure do. These are exciting me because what I'm hearing is that many of you are already familiar with some really great practices. And I am just going to applaud all of you for sharing these key points, and just to know that beef those up, turn them on the max level, because these are going to be the things that are going to really help support the reintegration and the sustained positive wellness for your students. So thank you for sharing some of those key words with us. I'm very inspired to hear that.
Thank you, Dr. Paz. I will turn it now back to Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Paz, for your insightful comments. I love the metaphor of the invisible backpack. It's certainly easy for us to acknowledge that there were many students whose invisible backpacks were full of some heavy bricks in February and March. And so we have no reason to assume that those invisible backpacks are going to come back less full, and many, many reasons to be concerned that some of them will come back even more full. And in order for us to succeed with those students, your message is that we need to attend to their social emotional needs. And we really appreciate you sharing with us today. So we are fortunate to have an impressive panel of educational experts on today's webinar. Today's panel includes winners of the 2019 Sanford Teaching Award. These individuals were named the top inspirational teacher in their state and qualified for the honor of being named the nation's top inspirational teacher in 2019. Our outstanding teacher panelists include Linda Amici from Alcott Elementary in Westerville, Ohio, Sarah Freyer from Woodridge International School in Washington, D.C., Claudine James from Malvern Middle School in Malvern, Arkansas, and Laura Thompson from William F. Cook Jr. Elementary in Hockessin, Delaware. Now that we've heard Dr. Paz's remarks, we're fortunate to benefit from the perspective of these award-winning teachers. So why might the reopening of the 2021 academic year be more difficult for many students? Why should teachers be concerned? Ms. Thompson, what are your thoughts?
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for this question. More than ever, the opening of the 2021 school year will be about relationship building. We usually focus a bit on building relationships at the beginning of the school year anyway. We have icebreakers and morning meetings to get to know each other a bit better. We spend time at the beginning of the year reviewing academics from the previous year. We have some assemblies to help students learn or remember the school rules and policies, and these events usually last a week or two, and then we're back to business as usual. But as Dr. Paws questioned, what will business as usual look like this year? I can speak as a teacher and as a parent, but I'm also interested in what kids think. So I asked a couple of 15-year-olds, high school freshmen, what they think will be different next year. They said that it will be really strange to wear a mask. I've seen some jokes in social media talking about kindergarten students wearing masks in school and how they might become more of a distraction, being used as a slingshot or worrying about whose mask is best. But I can see these issues with older students as well. The 15-year-olds also expressed that social distancing at school will be strange, and they wonder if it will affect their length of classes, their composition of classes, and their interaction with staff and other students. I asked a few 5th grade students who have the added pressure of beginning the school year at a new school with new teachers and a new peer group, and they are concerned about being academically, emotionally, and socially ready to return. In addition to COVID concerns, discussions about race have been elevated as we have realized the systemic issues involving equity. As more individuals realize that differences should not breed disadvantages, we have many people who are transitioning in their thinking and in their behavior. You asked me why teachers should be concerned about a different beginning in the 2021 school year. I reiterate that the beginning of the school year will be more than ever about building relationships. We will need to have courageous conversations to better understand ourselves and others. We need to learn about self-care to handle stress, fears, and anxiety that might occur regarding health issues. And engaging in these practices will not just be a part of the beginning of the school year, but it must be extended thoughtfully throughout the year. Reconnecting after an extended isolation and after tense situations will be paramount, but this will be complicated by wearing masks and social distancing, two things that physically separate us, while emotionally we need to come together.
Thank you so much for those wise comments. Your words remind me of a quote from the psychiatrist James Comer, who said, "No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship." And your comments emphasize the importance of relationship. Still, as schools reopen, it may be easy for some teachers to just want to jump back into routines that focus on the teaching of academic content without attending to the trauma that some students may have experienced. Ms. Amici, why might this sometimes be counterproductive?
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. That Roosevelt quote comes to mind. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I really believe that jumping right back into academics would be more than just counterproductive, but it would actually do a great injustice to the students to whom we've been entrusted. Every student is different. They're each going to express their response to trauma in a different way, and we need to be there to help them express and sort these emotions out when they're ready to share their unique experiences with us. Our students share similarities as well. They share the commonality that they each need to feel understood and accepted before they will emerge from their shell and take risks socially, relationally, and academically. I believe our best approach is to help students to know that they are safe. They need to know that we will hold their hearts gently as we create a culture of respect and harmony in our space. They need to know that they can trust us and that we believe that they are capable of great accomplishments. Our students will come to us this fall having been through the trauma of disconnection and feeling pretty powerless. As a huge proponent of project-based work, I think we would also be wise to balance that out by giving them more voice and choice and agency in our lesson design. To me, we would be wise as educators to invite our students to be co-constructors in the development of the projects we design and our collective environment. And project-based learning, in my experience, is an excellent tool for that. In order for them to have the capacity to absorb, they must understand that they're safe enough to take a risk, be it relational, social, or academic. Regardless of how fantastic your lesson may be at engaging and motivating a student, if that student is dealing with stress or trauma or unable to get over the tough interaction they had right before they entered that classroom, be it digital or live, they're not going to be able to receive, focus on, or process the dynamic curriculum that's being offered. Addressing our students' social, emotional needs at the beginning, as well as throughout, as Laura said, builds capacity of our learners, so they're essentially more open to learning more. Addressing SEL has the power to change the trajectory of the mental health of our future leaders and has long-term benefits then to society.
Those are such wise and important comments, Ms. Amici. Thank you so much. So still, we know that this is important, not just as we anticipate, but we also know that it's important just from what so many of us as educators have seen our students experience. Ms. Freyer, can you recall a situation in which your students endured trauma and why it was important for you to take the time to help them through it? What happened?
Yes, thank you. So my first year teaching, I was taking over a class where a teacher was leaving because she said the behavior of the students was out of control and it was stressful. So right away when I walked into the class, the teacher next door told me, he's like, "Hey, welcome to second grade." And she said, "Watch out for that one in the back, that's the wing leader." And so instantly right away, I try to go into my thoughts of what the professors say to do when you're dealing with children that has behavior issues. So right away, I asked the kids, I introduced myself, and I told them, I want you to write down, what would you like for your teacher to be like? If you had to model or make your best teacher, what does that teacher do? So they took time, they wrote down things, and the student in the back who the other teacher referred to with the behavior problem, she did have behavior issues. But it was because she had trauma. And I realized that after she wrote the assignment, and she told me her dream teacher would just ask her why she acts like that. So that night, as I read over their letters, I went to her the next day and I said, Leah, what's going on? And she said, Miss Fry, I just don't want to be here. And I said, why? She said, I wish I was back home. And I said, well, where's home? Come to find out, she had just moved to North Carolina because her family their house got wiped away in the Hurricane of Katrina. So right there of that trauma of going through Hurricane Katrina, losing everything, coming to a new state, not knowing anybody. No one really took the time, she said, to really talk to her, ask her why. So she was just acting out of hurt, pain, anxiety. And so with that, I started having lunch brunch with her, getting to know her outside of school and also the other students. And just in that short amount of time of just asking her what was wrong and what with their dream teacher, she continued to be the ringleader. But she continued to be the ringleader of being a phenomenal student, a power student, acts that's, she was engaging. She was just a true leader. So just taking that time out to get to know the students can really change. So yeah.
That is a wonderful illustration of the kind of positive impact a teacher can have when they simply try to ask a student what's going on with them. Thank you for sharing, Ms. Freyer. Clearly, it's important for educators to be mindful of the traumas their students have endured or are enduring. Ms. James, what major issues are your students likely to be worried about as school reopens?
Hello. Thank you for an opportunity to answer this question because it really speaks to me as an educator. I think that there are several different levels of worries that students are going to have, and the worries are going to be based on their level of where they're in school. Because I think the upper grades are going to be worried about, what are my grades going to look like? What is my GPA? How's all this going to affect my GPA? ACT testing, APT. I mean, not APT, AP testing. All of that those things are all concerns that the upper grades will have. The lower grades will probably be worried about pull-out activities such as PE, art, and choir, which in some districts this upcoming school year will be canceled. And so those are the things that actually make school fun for kids. So not having those activities and not having the interaction with other students from other classes will probably cause them to worry. And I think also just listening to parents' comments. I think parents sometimes have that negative tone, and so the kids are worried about what are their parents thinking or how their parents going to perceive this, what decisions their parents are going to make. In our local school district, we sent out a survey asking, what did you want your child to do for the coming school year? And so we're waiting on those surveys to come in, and we will use those to evaluate what services we will provide based upon the guidelines provided by the state. But most importantly, it doesn't matter what age group the kids are. I think their major issue for all students is they're going to be worried about the uncertainty of their life. 2020 has come in and it's been a Hurricane Katrina for the entire world and just about knocked everyone into a level of uncertainty. There's a quote that says, I want to be that teacher that when my children look back on their education, they feel loved in their hearts, have a smile on their face, and can truly say that they knew I cared about them. So no matter what issues the students may be facing, no matter the uncertainty, that's the part that makes us realize how important social emotional learning is. Because no matter what the students face, You have the wheel is in your hand in your classroom to change direction and see how your kids, your students feel about education. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. James. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. So, Ms. Rothengast, could you invite the audience to participate in the next question?
Yes, thank you, award-winning teachers. It was wonderful to hear your examples. We wanted to ask the audience at this time, what's one strategy that will support teachers and students building relationships in the new school year? If you don't mind typing your responses in the chat box, because I know others are anxious to hear your responses. Community building circles. Morning meetings. Morning meetings, I love the idea of students sharing what they need. Restorative practices. Healing circles. Community building. Check-in time. Reflections. Healing circles. Social stories. Calming corner. Restorative circles. Coffee with the principal for parents. Temperature checks, checking on with the students quickly. Journaling. Yoga. Open door for parents. Check-in, anchor charts, journaling, talking circles, social stories, class meetings, advisories, making sure SEL comes first. Storytelling, mindfulness breaks, talking and listening. So many great ideas that are being shared. Thank you for sharing your ideas to give the group more ideas of how we can focus on that critical building relationships. Dr. Johnson, back to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our amazing teachers. We're also fortunate to have a group of outstanding award-winning principals. These principals lead schools that are winners of the America's Best Urban Schools Award. Even though their schools serve low-income communities with all of the challenges we associate with urbanicity, every demographic group of students in their school outperforms the overall statewide averages for all students. So I'm pleased to introduce Lauren Malhoit, principal of James Deanda Elementary in Houston, Texas, Alexa Sorden, principal of Concourse Village Elementary in the Bronx, New York, and Suzanne Berry, principal of Winbrook Elementary in West Palm Beach, Florida. So, principals, as schools reopen, your colleagues around the country will likely be focused on the importance of covering academic content and addressing learning needs while ensuring everyone's physical health and safety. That's appropriate. But why is it just as important for principals to attend to the social and emotional needs of students, teachers, and support staff? Principal Sorden, what are your thoughts?
Hello, Dr. Johnson and all attendees and panelists. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. So we've talked a lot about that student piece, and I know Dr. Paz referenced the invisible backpack, but that also applies to our teachers and our support staff. So as a school leader, I am a role model for what it means to take care of social emotional needs. So if I'm able to be empathetic and connect with my educators and my family and support staff, that would serve as a model for our teachers as well. And it's about creating a culture where students, educators, and families can feel connected so that they feel safe and secure and a place where learning can take place. In order to ensure that my students have the best educational experiences, I need to be really aware of what my teachers' needs are and that I'm creating a space within our building where it's okay to say I need help, where it's okay to unpack that invisible backpack so that we could continue to do the work of educating our scholars. So that is my primary role. It has always been, but more so this year than ever, to make sure that I am attending to the social needs of the entire community, but knowing that I need to be really, really aware of my teachers, the support staff, and the families as well, because I know if I do that well, then my teachers will be able to do it for our students. Thank you.
Such a wise and wonderful answer. Thank you, Principal Sorton. It's so valuable to have principals of high achieving schools affirm the critical importance of attending to everyone's social and emotional needs. Principal Melhoit, could you expand by helping us understand what social emotional issues could derail a successful reopening if they're not addressed well? Could someone help unmute Principal Melhoit?
Okay, here we are. Thank you, Dr. Johnson, and I'm honored to be here and engage in these truly critical discussions about the social emotional wellness of our communities across the nation and across the globe, which include not just our students, but our staff, our parents, our neighbors, our community members, and pretty much everyone. So along with the plan that schools need to have to be ready to open and to support all the needs, it's critical that our messaging and the rollout of those plans are carefully thought through. We know parents entrust their kids to us, students trust us to be the safe space for them, teachers and staff trust their administrators, their campus and district level supports to have a comprehensive needs-based plan in place. Schools are and should be a place of safety and trust. But we need to be careful about the messaging that we are sending. What are the underlying messages we're saying when we say, kids, come to school and be happy, but you have to stay 6 feet away from me? And what kind of messages are we sharing when the teacher's giving a smile, but they're wearing a mask and the kids can't see that nonverbal communication? So much like an analogy of parenting 101, students and people will feed off of our reactions. If a baby is learning to walk and they fall down, they often look at their mom before they start crying. And if the mom's response shows increased concern, the baby may cry more and have a bigger reaction. But if a mom addresses the fall and offers hope and says, it's okay, let's try again, the baby might have a different response. So we need to make sure that our plans are created and communicated to ensure that safety is addressed, but that we're also calming the anxieties of teachers, parents, and students alike. I think it's also critical to make sure that our plans aren't derailed by assuming that our kids' needs are multifaceted and that the plans that we have are addressing several issues. Some students, for them, their schools are a safe haven. They can't wait to get back. Schools are where they have 3 meals a day. But for other kids who've been home for 5 months, their homes might be their new normal and their homes are their safe havens. So one way HISD, Houston Independent School District, is addressing that is by supporting through wraparound services, which is a counseling capacity, but working with academics to address child needs, supporting critical issues of mental and physical health, food insecurity, and stable housing. And those needs are addressed on an individual basis, not just for our kids, but for the people at our schools. Much like Dr. Paz said, we're very eager to get back to learning, and I think a lot of us want to jump into curriculum-based objectives, not because gaps and regression are going to be real. But we need to also pay attention to the critical social emotional needs and what our messaging is when we have face masks that hide our smiles and we can't give high fives as we would after a child is successful. So I hope that I wish everyone good luck in reopening their schools during this critical time, and thank you again for allowing me to share today.
Thank you for sharing those important points. Obviously, our challenge as educators is more complicated than ever, but the importance of us figuring out ways to address those complexities is also more important than ever. And so your comments are so important. And it also suggests that, you know, if we disregard some of these social emotional concerns, the results could backfire and in ways that actually harm academic results. So Principal Berry, how will your school's efforts to address social emotional needs actually help address students' academic needs?
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Well, first of all, I want to start off by saying, you know, it's such a shame that we started out with the COVID-19, and then now we've added on race-related violence along with that. So as a school center, you know, it's quite a few things that we have to deal with when it comes to bringing everyone back and talking about their social emotional learning and their safety, their need for safety. Throughout the summer, majority of my time, because I know the community needs to hear from the principal, needs to see the principal. So it's been a lot of going into the communities. I serve approximately 94% free and reduced lunch and over 800 students, over 100 staff. So along with my assistant principal and one other administrative position, we've been out in the communities practicing social distancing, but also making sure our parents see us out and about. My school site is a school site that provides lunch, grab and go meals on certain days for the families. And although this is something that is handled by the school food service department of our district, I've made every effort to be at every single site. If I'm not available, my assistant principal will go there as well. Because I want my parents to see me there. I want my parents, if they had questions, you know, before we started summer, they know, okay, Miss Berry will be here when I go to pick up food for my child today. I can quickly ask a question that way. So it's kind of continual with building that trust and that need for them, because we will not be able to, you know, have them in any way be successful academically if their safety, if they feel they're not safe. We have to make sure we're there for our staff and also our parents. We have to educate the community. I have a lot of ESOL students, a lot of Hispanic students. From also being in South Florida, we have quite a few families from the Caribbean. I myself am from the Caribbean. So it's such a huge melting pot, and you just have to be there, because sometimes the school is all that they trust. With everything that's going on right now, they look for the school for direction. They look for more, a lot more than just educating their students. I mean, there's just so much that we have to do. And again, once, you know, you're out there and you're providing for their basic needs of feeling safe, then we can then go into the academic needs.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I wanted to hear from the audience now, because we just heard so many ideas that will resonate with many of you. So we wanted to take a minute to hear one takeaway that resonated with you from this discussion with our panel of principals. So if you don't mind to type in the question box, something has just resonated with you, as we just heard so many inspirational ideas. And ideas are popping up. Safety first, consistency of messaging is critical. Everyone needs to feel safe before learning can occur. Comprehensive plan, the importance of visibility, being visible, including parents, building trust, loving and caring, supporting SEL for all, trust, unity, supporting staff, covering their basic needs, being there consistently, safety for all, getting everyone on board, showing love, understanding learning can't happen unless we students feel safe and welcome, be empathetic, basic needs before academics. Thank you all for sharing. Back to you, Dr. Johnson.
I really appreciate the comments of our teachers and our principals. what occurs to me as I listen is that we all recognize, acknowledge the importance of social distancing, but every foot of social distancing may necessitate planning to reduce emotional distance. And I think that that's threaded through the comments of our teachers and principals. I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague at INCUST, Dr. Jose Anikas. Dr. Anikas has served many important roles in schools and school districts and currently serves as an executive coach at INCUST. Dr. Anikas, in a few words, could you share what all this should mean for district level leaders? What should district leaders be doing right now to encourage thoughtful planning for addressing the wide range of social emotional issues children are likely to bring back to school?
Absolutely. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of today's important discussion. District leaders should be proactively assessing social emotional needs now. It's not something that can wait. This process could begin with an effort to communicate and consult with all district stakeholders, including families and staff, regarding the anticipated effects and needs of not just the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the recent police brutality and related unrest. This could include a combination of the district presenting results of peer-reviewed studies, but also listening to stakeholders to identify local needs. It's important, I might add, that district leaders lead a discussion as a way to support site leaders should any stakeholders disagree with modified learning objectives that include addressing student social emotional needs. As mentioned earlier by Dr. Paz, district leaders should also begin to plan for the administration of a universal social emotional well-being screening tool to collect and assess staff, student, and family emotional needs. As I indicated earlier, this is not anything that should be prolonged. It should be implemented as soon as possible, because a district leader is going to need that information with a sufficient amount of time to begin planning. Once a clear picture of the social emotional needs begins to develop, district leaders should immediately begin planning and communicating. This may include beginning dialogue with collective bargaining leaders. For example, if social emotional learning will be integrated in the classroom, it may be that certain collective bargaining agreement portions might need to be addressed. District leaders should also begin assessing available funds and communicating with site leaders what's available in order to implement all the great ideas that were explained today. For example, in California, the State Board of Education recently approved increased flexibility of federal funds to meet student, staff, and family needs. Aside from the federal relief funds that we've all heard about, district leaders should also identify other state funds that have been recently made available. For example, in California, there have been some recent funds available that districts can apply for. This is important because, as I just said, there's a lot of great ideas that will need funding in order to implement. As an example, if a district plans to use restorative or healing circles with teens to help address perceived racism and to increase their agencies, they may need to pay a facilitator. If there's a need for additional professional social emotional professionals, we need to plan for that now. Another idea, if, for example, you need a dedicated healing center, you may want to start planning for that now. Maybe you need to bring in a portable, maybe you need to repurpose a room, but you need to make sure that you have a sufficient amount of funds to comply with corresponding regulations such as the American with Disabilities Act. District leaders should also research and capitalize on the increased flexibility of instructional minutes to facilitate the integration of the social emotional supports. For example, in California, I know I mentioned California because that's where I am. Every state is doing something a little bit different, but nonetheless, there has been an increase of flexibility regarding instructional minutes. And in California, they've increased the required instructional minutes to allow districts to implement the and address the needs, social emotional needs of students, staff, and families. However, district leaders also need to be aware that if the learning platform that will be implemented involves a distance learning format, there are also new requirements. For example, in California, districts are going to have to confirm that each student has a computer and access to the internet. And then finally, districts should also develop and communicate a district-wide tiered approach that reflects identified needs and explicitly outlines how social emotional supports will be addressed. For example, if a person or rather a student is disciplined, how is one going to be trained, meaning a staff member, and how to identify whether it's a manifestation of trauma or whether or not it's discipline. I cannot stress enough how important it's going to be that districts, especially with teenagers, begin to discuss the overlap between discipline and the manifestations of trauma. If it's a distance learning format, what role are we going to ask the parents to play in this tiered approach? For example, will the district provide training for families about the signs and symptoms of trauma? How many student absences will trigger a tier 2 intervention? And above all, communicate, communicate, communicate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Iniguez. We are unfortunately out of time, but we want to thank all of our distinguished panelists, our award-winning teachers, our award-winning principals, executive coach Iniguez, and our expert school psychologist, Dr. Paz. As well, we want to thank everyone in our audience. We hope you return for the upcoming sessions in this webinar series. We look forward to helping you plan for a school year that supports every student and every demographic group of students in ways that will lead to their social, emotional, and academic success. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. As this webinar comes to a close, there will be a brief survey that will pop up on your screen. We appreciate you taking a minute to complete it, as your feedback is essential for us to continue to develop the quality of the content for what you want and need. If you have additional questions about this series, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at sanfordinspired.nu.edu. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next webinar. Goodbye.